Dear Earthmates, we are visiting Elizabeth Becker in New York. Uh, are you in New York?
Washington.
Washington. My mind, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Washington, D.C. Yes. Um, I've been there. Very interesting. When the trees were blossoming,
Yes,
April, I think it was.
yes, yes.
Um, um, People who are interested in world affairs should know you, should have an idea about you, but still, nevertheless, let me say that uh, to the audience, Elizabeth Becker was invited to Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge's Cambodia in 1978. One of the three Western journalists, uh, the others being actually a historian. And uh, but then instead of me trying to summarize it, would you like to say a few things about um, I'm sure you've summarized that lots of times, but you received an invitation. What was your reaction when you received the invitation? That
Uh,
moment.
it's not exactly what happened. It,
Oh,
I mean, invitation sounds like it's out of the blue, and not at all. I had been trying to get a visa.
oh,
The country had been closed off ever since they won in 1975. Information, they were completely cut off, much more than, say, in modern day North Korea today. All the borders were closed. Everything was closed. You couldn't make a phone call, send a letter, a telegram, nothing. So I had lived there for 2 years covering the country during the war and was very concerned about the little we heard. The refugees on the Thai border, the few who could get through, the hundreds rather than thousands, I believe, at that stage, eventually thousands. You told a horrible story. You even the government radio, which was another source of information, described a country that they thought was good, but sounded severe at the kindest word would be severe. So I really wanted to go, and I was one of many journalists who applied, and I would send letters and cables to the embassy in Beijing. Then it was called Peking, and the one time that a Khmer Rouge official came to the United States was for the UN General Assembly, and I would always go up for that and uh, find my way to whatever press conference they did or didn't have, and the reception, so I could see the Foreign Minister Yang Suri. So he became very familiar with me, and they knew my work from the war. So we all journalists all felt someone was going to be invited. So when I received the invitation, it was essentially saying, yes, we accept your, they accepted my request for a visa, which is not an invitation, which sounds like it's a party. And it, I wasn't totally surprised because the Khmer Rouge were in big trouble. They had instigated a border war with Vietnam, and it was getting out of control. They had already invited the Secretary General for the UN, Kurt um, Kurt Wall. Oh, my brain just went. The Austrian who was a former Nazi,
Kurt Waldheim.
Kurt Waldheim, and he had said no, that the Soviets had told him that he would not want to go there, and so I think they were down to inviting journalists as one way to get their story out because they knew that the Vietnamese were not going to take a second year of a limited border war. So it was not out of the blue at all.
Mhm.
And because I had been applying for so long, I was somewhat better prepared than if it come out of the blue.
Wonderful. So Um, yeah, and it's when we look back, it's great that they accepted your request. Um, uh, what were your impressions of Pol Pot when you?
Well, he was the last day of the trip. So my impressions were very much informed from the full 2 weeks we had spent in Cambodia
Mhm.
beforehand. And I was the only one of the three who had lived in the country and spoke some of the language and had written a lot about it. The Malcolm Caldwell, the professor, had never been there. He'd written about it, but he'd never been there. And he wrote very, very admiring a book about Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge Revolution. Richard Dudman, the other American reporter, senior, very much senior to me. He was 62 or 3, and I was 31. So he was a well-known journalist who had been to Cambodia only once before and been captured by the North Vietnamese. So he had a very different experience. He had held for a couple of weeks. So those three, and I was shocked. You can read as much as you want about a revolution, but then I saw it, and literally Phnom Penh had been emptied and was still empty three and a half years later. It was unbelievable, and all normal life had been erased. It's hard to imagine, but all normal life, no commerce, no markets, no entertainment, no education, no religious life, nothing. There was work and that was it. And the only people living there, as what we were told, and as far as I could tell, were what they called their political cadre, who were better than the just common laborers. And everybody else had been sent from the first day to the countryside to what you would call a labor camp, but they called a much nicer term, a cooperative. And so the cooperative sounds much better than labor camp, but that's what they were. And so that so then we spent 2 weeks driving around the country and only seeing people that they wanted us to see. We were under armed guard all the time, no freedom of movement. And we were treated well. I mean, very well fed, comfortable Mercedes-Benz to drive in, nice guest house. But there was no getting away from the fact that this was the sort, why would they ever think that anybody would want to live this way? And that we would, I thought, what, and I knew that the country did not, it was not like the Cambodia, pre-war Cambodia was doing okay. I mean, it did not need anything severe. Um, and this was beyond severe. There's no other revolution that severe and that radical, and from the very first day. So by the time I get to see Pol Pot, I have a first-hand feeling of just what they have done. And this is without knowing the savagery behind all of this. I'd read about that, and but I only got bits and pieces.
Yes. Uh, and for youngsters especially, I'll add that about a quarter of the population were killed directly or um, by indirectly um, for lack of food, etc., healthcare. Yes, it was a genocide, and um, and that was done in the name of the people, in the name of a utopia, in the name of communism. The word commune has a nice touch, a warm touch, when we think of the Paris Commune, for example. But then, unfortunately, when it comes to uh, Pol Pot or Stalin, etc., unfortunately, a lot of damage has been done to.
Well, one of the ways that I knew they were hiding some that this was all propaganda. I mean, that it was obvious it was all propaganda, but that they went out of their way to hide anything that would reveal what was going on. And the way I tried to give them an out to disprove this was I said, just let me meet some people from Phnom Penh. You know, Phnom Penh was the big city. Let me meet some people from who had been in Phnom Penh before 1975, and they never did. I think they had one worker who had been a cyclo driver, which is a very, a pedicab. And it's a very, very it was it was it was a very non-convincing person to bring before me. And so they were hiding an awful lot. And there we went from one deserted um place to another deserted place. And if we saw people, it was from a distance, so we couldn't see. And when we did get to a co-op with people in it, um, they were clearly not regular. I mean, they were clearly of a more pampered staff. I later, and it's in my book when the war was over, that I later went through and found the documents proving all of this was true, that they had set up the elite cadre to pretend to be peasants and to be interviewed by us and act like they were peasants. So it was 100% propaganda.
Yes. Yeah, I remember reading some newspapers in Turkey. Um, so tragic. Um, so journalism has been vital um, as far as reaching truth or finding out what's going on really. And so journalists are pioneers and peace builders, actually, because when truth does help
Yep.
peace, um, because without truth, we cannot have justice, etc. Um, you have also been elsewhere, um, war zones, tragic places, uh, right?
Yeah. And both for the Washington Post and the New York Times. But I after that I never spent that that long. I'm 2 years at one war. No, I was a Pentagon correspondent at the New York Times and went to danger zones. Yes, and the end of the war in Kosovo was the last one. But the the thing about journalists and truth is that you 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 know you're important when they try to shut you down. And I mean that's what's going on right now, and that's been all through my career. Our both as a correspondent and as an editor, it's amazing the lengths people will go to hide the truth from you and to undermine you. And then you find out years later how important it was that you had written whatever you had written, that it mattered to people. And that I'll circle back to Pol Pot because the last, as I said, on the last day, we were finally given able to go and interview Pol Pot. And Richard Dudman, the other journalist, and I went on our own. And then after that, Malcolm Caldwell went on his own. And I had only seen grainy black and white photographs of Pol Pot, nothing. Some of the other leaders, much better images, but not very good ones of Pol Pot. So I was quite surprised at how elegant he was. He was handsome and elegant, and he had a charming smile. Um, very well groomed, very well dressed. And we went to sit down to interview him. And as is the case in many situations, we had to send in our answers in advance. I mean, our questions, excuse me, our questions in advance. And he said through a translator, he would send answers, written answers to the questions, but he wanted to talk to us about one issue. And the issue was the upcoming Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia. Now, to go back in 1978, this is what no one had predicted. The entire premise of the American war in Vietnam was to prevent a communist Vietnam that the Americans were convinced would then invade other countries of Southeast Asia to turn them into communists. The opposite happened. The other communists, they invaded the other communist country because Cambodia had started a border war with them. So it's hard to describe what a flip this is since the Americans, the 10 years of the Vietnam War. Why? When in fact, communist Vietnam wanted to overthrow communist Cambodia. It's totally not. Anyway,
And
Richard Dudman and I listened to this, and at one point he said he expected the Warsaw Pact troops to come and help Vietnam because
Warsaw Pact
troops.
not
And
not
no, the Warsaw Pact troops to come and help Vietnam.
Oh yes.
To fight Cambodia. And I
Mm-hmm.
turned to Richard and I said, "Did you hear Warsaw Pact?" And I asked the translator, and he said, "Yes, Warsaw Pact." So in his crazy imagination, he thought that Warsaw Pact would be sending their tanks across the paddy fields to come into Cambodia. So his message to us was that he wanted NATO to help Cambodia. It's insane.
Strange.
It's crazy. And
Yes.
as I said, this is 1978. It's a little more than 3 years after the American war had ended. After barely a little more than 3 years after Vietnam had become unified. So this was not, no one expected this. So dutifully, we took down the notes, and it was just hours, so more than a couple hours of this, just listening to him go on and on and on. And he did not expect Soviet troops or Chinese troops. He expected Warsaw Pact troops or NATO troops. So we went back and to our guest house, and Malcolm then followed us, and he only talked to Pol Pot about revolutionary agriculture. Totally abstract. And he came back and was very thrilled that he had this exclusive interview with Pol Pot. And we had dinner, and I had been arguing with the two men that I thought that this was not good, that the revolution was not good. And they said, no, we've seen with our own eyes, they have co-ops, they have blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, that's not my idea of a good revolution, blah, blah, blah. And there's so many reasons I don't trust. And I think it's, anyway, so we were friendly dinner, very friendly dinner, not, and so we went to bed, and that night after midnight, I was on the first floor and they were on the second floor, American, and I heard a bang and I thought it was a garbage can, and I went out to look, and it was an armed assassin, bandolier cross and gun. And he pointed it at me, and I said no in Khmer and ran into my room, closed the door but didn't lock it, and hid in the bathtub. And he went upstairs and shot at the bottom of Richard Dudman's door, and then went into Malcolm Caldwell's bedroom and shot him and just totally killed him. Now, I could just hear these bullets, and then I could hear people running around outside. I thought that the Vietnamese invasion had already started and that we were in the crossfire. So I, just thought of other things and waited it out. It was terrifying. beyond terrifying. And 4 hours later, I can't remember, the a top official came in and said that Malcolm Caldwell had been murdered and that it was the Vietnamese. And I said, I'm sorry, but the assassin that I saw was Cambodian. And he said, no, no, it's Vietnamese. I said, so where else in Phnom Penh did the Vietnamese go? And they said, only here. Why in the world would they only, if it were Vietnamese, why would they come after us when, they'd want to get you guys anyway? But I'm making it sound more coherent than it was. And so we didn't sleep at night. The next morning, Malcolm was laid out in a coffin, and we took it to the airport and took his body back to Beijing. And all the while, we had given them cables to send off to our newspapers. It turned out they had not sent any of them. So when all through those 2 weeks, and especially not the morning that we were coming with the body. So when we arrived, no one was there to meet us.
Oh, another shock.
So we had to work real hard, and finally the British embassy sent a top official, and they started to take care of it. And a top Khmer Rouge official was with us, and he handled all of that. But even when I sent my first stories in from Beijing, the news desk couldn't believe it. They just could not believe that it happened. It was, but anyway, so it took quite a long time to totally understand what had happened. What was helpful is, of course, the Vietnamese did invade. The next day, the invasion started. And it reached Phnom Penh January 9th. I'm not good with numbers, but I think it's January 9th. And so that opened up all the archives. And that's how I was able to put together my book. And when I said, you don't know how what's important or what isn't for many years later. And the movie you're talking about was just, it's called, in French, Rendezvous Avec Pol Pot, and it premiered at Cannes last year. And that's a story that helps explain. And if I had not written that book, that story would have disappeared. So that's, as a writer, another movie is made from my book about a person, and several novels were based on the book. I mean, it had its own life, and it's being I'm doing a new preface for the 40th anniversary next year.
Would you like a theater play? Has it been done?
I'm sorry?
Would you like a theater play?
I'm fine with the movie. That's good.
Because
No,
I'm not and
no, it's I was especially happy of a movie based on one of the women who I profiled, who was arrested, thrown into Tuol Sleng, the torture center, and brutally murdered, raped. But her crime was writing love letters to her husband. And she wrote in the style of Sita from the Ramayana. And when I asked for it, I was the first person to ask at the Tuol Sleng Center for this file, and I chose her because she was a woman about my age who had lived in Phnom Penh about the time I was there, and I thought, oh well, maybe it'll be interesting. And very few people wrote about women in those days, and so they brought out the archivist brought out this huge fat file, the biggest file in the whole torture center, because it was all of her love letters. And it's just a remarkable story. And that has been made into a movie, and it's been written about a lot. And so discover, and a whole culture center is named after her in Phnom Penh. And it's also by the same the Richie Pond who did the movie about me, the recent one, Rendezvous avec Pol Pot. So it's knowing as a journalist what to pick up and then becoming a writer and pulling it all together and finding the right voices to weave the full story. And it's that's why I keep doing that kind of work because it does prove its worth. And it shows just how history can just flatten people and how the people who make it through, it's so much of it is luck, and it's also figuring out how to survive. But it should be a warning, but I don't think it's much of a warning because we keep getting into these horrible situations.
Yes, unfortunately. Um, uh, I guess you have often been invited to journalism classes so
Mhm.
that, newcomers can um, have some of your wisdom, experience, thoughts. Are you invited? Have you been invited to?
Oh, sure, 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 sure. Yes, yes.
Very important. And yes, because certain things cannot be totally expressed in writing, and this seeing someone, for example, you and I now, uh, on the phone, it couldn't be as rich as what we are doing now. Uh, so presence is important, being somewhere or
Yes, yes, yes. Yep,
together. That's it.
yep,
Uh,
yes, yes.
um, um, there are attempts to write world histories, and world history i- can be written faithfully only thanks to truthful journalists, I think. Uh, because without journalism, there are just sentences in history books. We need memoirs, we need
Hmm. Yep.
testimonies, etc.
Hmm.
Autobiographies, biographies.
Yep.
There is
Yep.
that's real history. Um, uh, well, what would you like to say about today's world and journalism? Would you like to, whatever you wish to say, would you like to say anything? Something.
Oh, no. Well, here I am in Washington, and we're facing a fascist government.
Mhm.
Um, it, uh, and everything that it's reminded me of all the things I saw in other countries, and now I have to figure out how to live and resist in this country. And it's at my age, it's the last thing I thought would happen. And
Ah,
it's what I've discovered is that I draw lessons from my background. Um, but it's emotionally very difficult when it's your own country. And
I,
when I was in Cambodia, I kept wondering why did so many Cambodians stay until the end when they could have escaped? Well, now I know why they stayed until the end because you don't you don't want to give up. You don't want to hand your country over to those people. And
we can
and
see.
that's what I'm feeling. That's what we're feeling now, and supporting all the resistance, writing, and leading with hope,
Mhm.
never giving up. And I feel I just was out in California with the Cambodia Film Festival, and one of the first things that these Cambodian Americans asked me about was, are they going to have, since the Trump ICE police, which are like the Gestapo, they said, are we gonna have to wear badges to prove we're citizens because they're going after people of color? And my country, Cambodians have, they felt safe in the United States for so long, and now they're wondering if they're safe.
Mhm.
Um, and so you can't do enough. You need to be as strong in your communities as before. And I write as I can, but I just feel, how can I be living this when I spent so much of my life trying to describe other horrible situations, whether it's the Iraq War that we started, or that, or covering other people's wars. It's like, why? How? And I can't answer how it's going to turn out, but I know I'm not going to give up.
Oh. Um, have you had a chance to visit Turkey?
Long ago,
Hmm.
long ago.
But what years was it? After the military coup here, 1980, or
Oh, before.
before the military coup in 1980?
Yeah.
In 1970s.
In 1970s, yes. Overland from India.
Okay. Okay.
And it was gorgeous. And I mean, my surprise was that I did not like Iran. I it was Iran was tough, but Turkey seemed much uh, e easier. Um, uh, it was not very, there's a lot of poverty at that stage, but fascinating,
Mhm.
fascinating. And of course, Istanbul, it's an amazing city.
Well, I agree. Honestly, it's unique. Um, Unfortunately, I need to use the word de-democratization. I made up this word. Is it
Okay.
used? No. But that's what's been happening in Turkey,
Yeah.
de-democratization.
Right.
And we see it elsewhere in the
Yeah.
States. Uh,
United States. Here.
yes, yes, unfortunately. And um, it's sad that human rights are no longer on the agenda of the Western governments, most of them. And uh, there is there has been a civilian coup d'etat in Turkey. Uh, when you look at the constitution, um, Turkey, the Republic of Turkey, is supposedly a secular, democratic state based on human rights, um, and a social state. 40 some years ago, uh, that new constitution, this was to me not good enough. Now it sounds utopian.
Yeah.
Uh, it is neither democratic nor secular, nor there's no law. No law is not. Uh, I mean, it's horrible, and many innocent, more and more innocent people have been kept for years now. It's a shame. It's a shame, and yeah, and yes,
No, it was when your main the opposition figure, mayor of Istanbul, when he was arrested, that's when everybody said, "Oh my gosh, that's it."
and there are intellectuals in prison for 8 years without conviction, without sentencing. It's just
Yeah.
somebody, that one person says, do this, do that. This is horrible. You know, Turkey was invaded 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. And thanks to Atatürk, that invasion was over, and then there was the secular republic. But for the past, since then, Turkey, this is the worst situation in Turkey. Worst. I am 72. I have never lived a worse situation. Even the military coup times were better because at least they, the law was, etc., etc. somebody was considered innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
Even during those times, there were some. So, I so and many people in Turkey are now realizing the importance of secularity. I I draw a distance. I separate secularism from secularity.
Mhm.
Secularism is a worldview, whereas secularity is the regime, the situation. And people said um, Turkey will never be like Saudi Arabia or Iran. Now, Saudi Arabia is in a good direction. And I worked in Saudi Arabia for 4 years
Wow.
uh, in 1980s. And I wrote a book about my experience there. Anyway, so your um, yeah, you are a great example, a role model, and um, would you like to add a few more things?
Yeah, just one more thing. And thank you for saying role model because I'm often asked to talk because I was the group of women who broke through. We were the first women war correspondents because before us, women couldn't cover battles, and during the Vietnam War, without even knowing what we were doing, we were taking advantage of a rare situation where the president of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, did not want to call this a war. So he said it was just a police action. And but he did want to follow the rules. So in a police action, you don't apply war standards. And so it was the first and only American war that was completely uh, open for coverage. There's no censorship, no embedding. Reporters with a press card could go all over Vietnam, just get the commander to let them in, and the commanders always did. But that also meant that there was not the prohibition against women. So without even knowing they were breaking the rules, the standard rules, they came in, and it was only about 2 or 3 years into the war that General Westmoreland, who was the head of the U.S. military, noticed that there are women. He said, "You don't belong here. It's against the rules." And the Pentagon, the civilian side said, we're not applying that rule here." And so, and that's to say that we didn't know we were role models. We didn't know we were breaking any rules. We just this different way. We never had. We came over without jobs, but and no money. Usually one-way ticket. But then once we got there, we worked our way into jobs, and we did not know how pioneering it was till much later. And we were afraid to say much because if they realized how much we were doing, they might pull the rug out from under us. Because in those days, women were not, women were mostly style reporters, society reporters. They were not political reporters, and they weren't economic reporters. They were just stuck away covering family and furniture and stuff like that. So nothing wrong with those, but they were the opposite. They weren't foreign correspondents even, much less war correspondents. So that's what I try to say to particularly, students, but all kinds of audiences that um, it was almost to our advantage that we didn't know that we were breaking the rules.
Mhm.
It was very much to our advantage, and which goes to say that once you know what you want to do, just to go ahead and uh, follow that path. The stumbling blocks will come along, but it doesn't matter. It's just, and there aren't that many of it. There weren't that many of us, and unfortunately, too many have died. But I wrote a book about us called "You Don't Belong Here," and it was published a few years ago. I focused on three women, one French photographer, an Australian news reporter and an American long form, Frankie Fitzgerald, Kate Webb, and Catherine Leroy. And and that again, and I say all of this through them, and then a couple of us are minor characters, but just to see what they went through and to grasp that from, even if it looks so heroic, it looks so pioneering, when you're living it and doing it, that's not what it feels like. And just keep, and that's an important lesson, because um, none of us regretted it. We all loved what we did, as hard as it was. And I think it was very good, as I said, that we didn't think we were role models. We were just doing it. That's the one thing I would add.
Okay. Now, two things have come to my mind, and I need to mention them. One of them is the terrible Myanmar situation. I have a young friend, Mohammed Alom. He's a human rights activist in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. They have been there for about 8, 9 years now. More than 1 million refugees. They are in a difficult situation, and he was in distress. Our friendship led to his contributed to his becoming a human rights activist. Anyway, but there is that situation. It's relatively far from the West, so that is a topic. I hope you, even you may not have time, but people like you, perhaps a few people, will focus on the situation there, Rohingya genocide and the refugees. Another thing is the terrible situation Bangladesh is in. Now, the West is not aware that the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, uh, Dr. Mohammed Yunus, is just a nice face of a brutal dictatorship in Bangladesh. A good friend of mine, Shahriyar Kebir, a journalist, uh, documentary filmmaker, I've known him for 12 years. He's been in prison upon false charges, fabricated charges. Hundreds of thousands of people in Bangladesh are in terrible shape and in prison. And the West is not aware because they say, oh, Nobel Prize winner is the spokesperson of the government. And I know that he is under the pressure because a friend of his is a friend of mine. He's under the pressure of um, uh, religious extremists, and terrible things are happening. So I hope the democratic uh, um, public opinion, journalists in the West, especially in the United States, because the U.S. government led to the army takeover in Bangladesh. This is very interesting. So if the United States puts some pressure on the present transitory government in Bangladesh regarding human rights, lots of lives can be saved. Otherwise, things will get worse and worse, and religious extremism cannot stop there, will not stop there. You know that. Uh, the West is under more and more, I mean, democratic values. I mean, this is, I, I've been trying to do my best.
I can't, I mean, all I can say is that I used to know the country better. I don't anymore. And since the students overthrew Srimati, what's her name? She's now in exile in Delhi, the leader. I mean, she was an authoritarian tyrant. Um, so beyond that, it's only been a year. I don't know, and I wouldn't want to comment.
The worst is the religious extremism.
Well, yes, but I mean, I'm just saying that I can't comment on it, and I don't want to say anything.
So,
And the problem right now is that the public opinion people have been concentrating a lot on Myanmar, but so much has happened in the world and so much has changed this year that
that's
It's
Yeah,
I read the British press more often on Bangladesh than and the Asian, but there's very little in America, and I don't think you're going to see much. I don't know
it's
what access they have either anyway, so I
no
can't there. I can't.
Gaza, Gaza tragedy.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I
And
hope,
may we all see better days.
yes, yes. And uh, I hope you'll visit with your husband
In
to
Turkey.
yeah, Istanbul and Antalya.
Okay.
Um, Spring is good.
Okay.
May is good. Early May is good for both Istanbul and for Antalya. And my wife is
Lovely invitation.
early May. You
Okay.
so you
I will tell him.
you can
Thank you again.
thank you so much,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
My best wishes to your family, to
And
the
yours as well.
and to the people of the United States, to the people of the world. Yes. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you very much.